true confession of a corporate coffee shop barista. My first job after moving to Los Angeles was at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and I can say with absolute certainty that working there was the worst job I've ever had in my whole entire life. In addition to being scheduled at some of the most ungodly hours in the morning and earning a paltry, almost unlivable weekly salary, I was made to wear an unflattering polyester uniform, all while enduring some of the world's worst customers. Then, of course, there was the job itself, making coffee. I was hired by a large bearded man named Jimbo, who I'm pretty sure was high when he offered me the position. His glossy, bloodshot eyes and frequent use of the word dude were what gave him away. Dude, you're hired, dude. I later learned that in addition to being a shift manager at the Coffee Bean, Jimbo also dabbled in drug dealing to supplement his income. He mainly sold marijuana, which he grew out of his basement, but would peddle the occasional crack rock as well. Hey, dude, welcome to the team, dude, Jimbo said when I came in for my first shift. So, dude, I'm going to have you start at the blenders. They're rad. So they've got you working the trenches, my coworker Penelope asked me later that morning. It was 5:30 a.m. and we were preparing to open up shop. Penelope was a thin, ginger-haired woman in her mid-30s who had been working at the Coffee Bean for close to 11 months, which officially made her a veteran. The what? I replied. The blenders. We call them the trenches. It's where they start all the new hires. Why do they call them that? Penelope snorted. You'll see. I quickly learned that working the blenders was like a harrowing form of endless torture. Not only were they loud and messy and left an individual sticky and smelling like sour milk, but I was the sole person in charge of making all iced beverages, which equaled approximately 85% of all drinks ordered. To make matters worse, the job was mind-numbingly monotonous. The iced drinks were pre-made and kept in large plastic drink dispensers. My task was to measure the appropriate amount of liquid, add ice, flick on the blender, and voila. It was the sort of job anyone with a pulse and an index finger could do. 15 minutes into my first shift and I wanted to scream. 4 endless hours later, at 10 a.m., when my lunch break finally rolled around, I contemplated not returning to work. But I had enough sense to know that quitting the Coffee Bean would only result in me having to find another crappy job elsewhere. So I stayed. At least I had a free medium-sized beverage of my choice to look forward to. Not that I'd want one. The managers at the Coffee Bean thought they were doing employees a courtesy by offering a free drink at the end of every shift. But the last thing a person wants after spending 8 hours in purgatory is a 16-ounce reminder of everything they've just endured. Now, there is a policy at the Coffee Bean that no customer should ever have to wait more than 120 seconds for their beverage to be made. To enforce this policy, employees were timed. Next to each of our stations was a computer monitor. As soon as an order was placed, it would pop up on the monitor, along with a little clock that counted down from 120. Failure to make a drink in 120 seconds or less could result in immediate termination, as indicated in the contract we all signed upon first being hired. I never actually witnessed anyone get canned for working too slowly, but it did evoke a sense of paranoia in people. Watching the timer count down was not dissimilar, I'd imagine, to being locked in a windowless room, strapped to a metal folding chair, and watching a time bomb tick towards detonation. It was literally a race against time with every drink you prepared. Doesn't this job make you want to kill yourself? I asked Penelope one afternoon. We were crouched behind the dumpsters outside the building enjoying a cigarette break together. She took a long, lazy drag from her Marlboro and said, "Why bother when I'm already dead inside?" Stinking of death. I have a date tonight. With who? Some guy I met online. Can you believe I've had to resort to the internet to meet men? I'm the saddest person I know. Since the turnover rate at the Coffee Bean was so high, it didn't take long for me to move up in the company's hierarchy. By my 5th week, I was promoted to from working the blenders to working the espresso machine. With working the espresso machine came a sense of power and prestige one didn't necessarily feel when working the blenders. As one had to be able to complete such tasks as making shots of espresso, measuring things, and steaming milk to a certain degree temperature. All of these things I did incredibly well. I think heating milk might be my specialty, I bragged to Penelope one afternoon. She just looked at me for a moment and said, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, and don't ever repeat it to anyone else ever again. By the way, I think I'm pregnant. Can you believe that? As if I didn't have enough trouble with my weight already. Who's the father? That guy I met online. I'm going to the doctor next week to find out for sure. I can't decide which terrifies me more, giving birth or having an abortion. It didn't take long for me to learn that the espresso machine came with its own slew of problems. Mornings were exceptionally brutal. Most customers were crabby because they hadn't had their coffee yet. In addition to that, they were almost always in a hurry. Okay, not to be an asshole, but could you move it along with my macchiato? I'm in a rush. I have a meeting across town in 10 minutes. Whenever someone said something like this, it took everything inside of me not to throw a pitcher of scalding hot milk in their face and holler, okay, first of all, you are being an asshole. Secondly, I'm going as fast as I can. And thirdly, maybe you shouldn't have stopped for coffee if you have a meeting across town in 10 minutes. Instead, I went the more passive-aggressive route and would simply smile and politely say, of course, I certainly wouldn't want you to be late. Then proceed to take as long as humanly possible. I coped with some of the rudest customers by messing up their drink orders in subtle, undetectable ways. One evening, an exceptionally rude woman ordered a non-fat decaf latte. She was a well-dressed English lass in her mid to late 50s. And make it extra hot, she demanded. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, more deplorable than a tepid cup of coffee. 120 seconds later, I presented her with a lukewarm, highly caffeinated latte made with half and half. Minutes later, she returned to the counter. Oh, this is positively wretched. Are you sure it's decaf? Of course. It's an extra hot, non-fat decaf latte, just like you ordered. Then why do I have the jitters? She held her shaking bejeweled hand up for me to see. Well, all decaf has a little bit of caffeine in it. I smiled. 7.5 weeks into the job, and I was promoted from working the espresso machine to working the cash register. Dude, congrats, dude, Jimbo said. You're working your way up the ranks quickly, dude. I think you've got manager potential. The mere thought of being a shift manager at the coffee bean made me want to die. Now, if you ever want to see the absolute worst in people, work at a cash register. Customers love verbally abusing cashiers and blaming them for things they have absolutely nothing to do with. The most common complaint I received was about prices. The average medium-sized beverage at the coffee bean is somewhere between $4 and $5. Often, after taking a customer's order and telling them their total, they would look back at me as if I had just confessed to partaking in human sacrificial ceremonies, or having sex with animals, or voting Republican, or saying something else wildly inappropriate. What? You've got to be kidding me. That's a ripoff. You are ridiculous. They acted as though I personally were the sole decision maker in how much the coffee bean and tea leaf should charge for drinks. But then, more often than not, even after recognizing that they were being ripped off, they would still hand over their visas to pay. Well, now it was ridiculous, I would imagine saying as I ran the credit card. Another thing people like to do was ask for discounts for no reason. Can I get a large, and will you only charge me for a small? I would say no, and they would look genuinely disappointed, which always troubled me, as it meant that they were actually stupid enough to think that I might adhere to their request. I just can't believe the audacity of some of these customers, I said to Penelope one afternoon during a cigarette break. I mean, who do they think they are? But Penelope didn't say anything in response. She seemed preoccupied, so I asked her what was wrong. I'm definitely pregnant, she replied, taking a drag from a cigarette. I guess this means I'm going to have to quit smoking. But perhaps the most difficult part about working the cash register was, not surprisingly, dealing with customers talking on cell phones. At the Coffee Bean, we called these people cellies. Often a cellie would approach the counter and say something like, "I'll have a cappuccino," then toss down the credit card and carry on with their phone conversation, completely leaving out all other pertinent information, such as what size of cappuccino they desired, whether or not they preferred regular or skim milk, or if the order was for here or to go. Then they would get upset if I interrupted their conversation to ask, "Can't you see I'm on the fucking phone?" as Sally once said. She was a blonde woman in her mid-20s and dressed in yoga pants and a tank top that read, "Namaste." I nicknamed her Yoga Bitch. After that, Yoga Bitch started coming into the Coffee Bean almost every day. She would prance through the front door, screaming into her cell phone, bark her order at me, throw down her American Express card, collect her beverage, then waltz back out. She never tipped or said thank you, and was often so loud that the moment she stepped into the store, nearly everyone turned to see who the annoying woman on the cell phone was. "Do you think she knows how obnoxious she is?" I asked Penelope once. "No. She's so wrapped up in her own little world, she doesn't even know other people exist. You could probably tell her to fuck off right to her face and she wouldn't even hear you." The next time Yoga Bitch came into the coffee shop, I thought I'd give Penelope's idea a shot and tell the woman to fuck off. It was raining that day. Yoga Bitch and her cell phone sauntered in and approached the register. "Soy latte, no phone," she said as she threw a soggy $20 bill at me. I entered the order into the register, then handed back the change. "Fuck you and have a great day." Yoga Bitch tossed the change into her bag, then headed over to the other end of the counter to collect her drink from the barista. Halfway there, she stopped. Closed her cell phone, turned around, and walked back towards me. "What did you just say to me?" "Excuse me?" I replied. Yoga Bitch stared at me with a mixed look of anger and confusion. I could tell she thought she had heard me, but wasn't entirely sure, and she was now debating what to do next. Would she call me out for telling her to fuck off and risk me denying the charges, then suggesting perhaps she had misheard me since she was on the phone? Or would she save face and ignore the whole thing altogether? She was in an impossible position. At that moment, I knew I had won. "Never mind," Yoga Bitch finally said, then turned around and walked out of the coffee shop, forgoing both her latte and her dignity. Not long after that, I quit my job at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. Or rather, I stopped showing up or answering my phone until Jimbo finally got the hint. After the incident with Yoga Bitch, I realized there was more to life than making coffee and teaching lessons to rude people on cell phones. Luckily, Penelope and I had exchanged numbers before I left. I called to inform her I wouldn't be returning to work. "You lucky son of a bitch. If I weren't pregnant, I'd quit too. You know, I always thought I'd be married, live in a house, and have a real job by now. Boy, was I wrong. My life is shit." "Just remember," I replied, "what you do for a living doesn't define who you are as a person." "Oh yeah? Then how do you define a person?" I thought about it for a moment, then said, "By how well they tip their barista."